Welcome back to the Flying with the Flock podcast, the best place to get all of your Eagles and other NFL related news. I'm your host, Matt, and welcome to the day before the draft day, ladies and gentlemen. We have made it to April 23rd, which means most of the final mock drafts are here from a lot of professionals, a lot of them making outrageous claims. A lot of teams throwing up smoke screens, so whether they're going to trade their picks or who they're interested in at their pick. So, you love to watch the mind games, but that's why I'm here, to simplify it for all of you guys. Before we get started, if I could ask you guys to leave a like and subscribe down below, that would be much appreciated before we get into this mock draft 3.0, our final for this off season. But yeah, before we get started, if you guys could do that, that would mean a lot to me, especially after this. It's going to be a little bit more of a dry season until we make it to like training camp, which then I can kind of, I can kind of finagle my way into some sort of stuff to bring some more news in. And some trades will probably be happening that season anyway, and we'll probably see some trades tomorrow or Friday as well. But with all that out of the way, I guess there's no time like the present to jump right into our final mock draft, ladies and gentlemen. This will include trades as well. All right. So, looking at it right now, obviously with the number one overall pick, we've kind of talked about this multiple times, but now it seems to be a certain. Tennessee's taking Cam Ward at 1. He's not going to slide. He's not going to be available at 2. So, and they don't seem to be trading out of that number one overall pick spot, which is what we thought they might do. So, as of right now, I currently have the Tennessee Titans filling probably their biggest need at that being quarterback with the best quarterback physicality wise in this draft. All right. Draft. Oh, come on. All right. And away we go. All right. So Cam Ward going number one overall. That's that. Next up, we have at the number 2 overall pick, we have the Cleveland Browns. Right now, and this goes for both the Browns and the Giants, they have been heavily rumored, especially over the past 2 days, that they've been fielding calls for the number 2 and number 3 overall picks, respectively. But I don't really have either of them trading out of these spots. They both have access to 2 of arguably the best generational players that we've seen in a while at their positions, that being Travis Hunter at corner wide receiver and Abdul Carter at edge as well, which gives away who the Giants might be taking in a second here. But similar to my last mock draft, I'm going to have the Browns taking the unicorn, that is Travis Hunter. Obviously, they need a lot of help, both at wide receiver after trading Amari Cooper, after possibly shopping Elijah Moore, or whether Elijah Moore walked, I forget whether he's a free agent or not. But they need help at wide receiver. They need a guy to pair up with Denzel Ward if he doesn't get traded. Or a guy to replace Denzel Ward if he does get traded. So this fills out 2 of their needs that they need, and he's arguably the most talented player in all of the draft, and maybe even the past few drafts. So at the number 2 overall pick, I have the Cleveland Browns selecting Travis Hunter, corner and wide receiver out of Colorado. I kind of gave up our next pick. That being the New York Giants at pick number 3 are most likely going to select Abdul Carter. Abdul Carter is arguably the best defensive player in this entire draft, and arguably the best prospect in this entire draft, which a lot of top prospect analysts have him being. He is a great player. I still feel like Travis Hunter is just a little bit above him, but he's still right up there. And he could be the future of the edge position. I wouldn't be surprised if he creates some headaches for a lot of teams over the next coming years. Even if he doesn't butt into the superstar that they want immediately, he will probably develop himself and become that. With him being described as like a Micah Parsons, Myles Garrett, TJ Watt like mixture when it comes to the edge position, which is pretty high praise with all those guys being top 3. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see this guy do some damage. Even if it's not as major as we hope at first, we'll most likely see Abdul Carter produce for the G-Men up in New York. So with the number 3 overall pick, I have the New York Giants selecting Abdul Carter, edge out of Penn State. All right, next up, it's been highly debated what New England's going to do at pick number 4. I feel like there's one clear thing that they should do, that being taking offensive line or dressing the offensive line to protect their franchise guy in Drake May. If they do this, if they bring in a physical guy, if they build up the trenches, which Vrabel likes to do anyway, they should be able to start building a playoff contender, per se. Obviously, that leaves us with probably the top offensive tackle in the entire draft, that being LSU's Will Campbell. There's been rumors that the Patriots could pass up on him because of his arm length, but I've heard that many times about a prospect. I mean, looking at Kenny Pickett having small hands and the Steelers being worried about that didn't really play a factor at all. Will Campbell seems to be a really tough cookie. He seems to be a good guy. He seems to be a physical menace on the offensive line, and he can lock down either the left tackle or right tackle position, whatever the Patriots feel like they need most. And with that, they might be able to lock down one of the sides of their offensive line for the next possible decade if everything goes right. So with the number 4 overall pick, I have the New England Patriots taking Will Campbell. Alright, so now it starts to get a little bit weird. In recent memory, I've been having like the same top 5 go to the same people. Obviously, that being Cam Ward to the Titans, Travis Hunter to the Browns, Abdul Carter to the Giants, Will Campbell to the Patriots. But here's where it starts to get a little bit weird. Normally, I would have stud defensive lineman Mason Graham going to the Jaguars. But I just have this weird feeling that that's not how this is going to play out. It very much could be. And let me preface this, any sort of pick I make could be completely wrong. A team could trade up ahead of the team I have taking that prospect and steal them away from them. Anything could happen, and that's what makes the football draft so interesting to me and so much fun. But I have, weirdly enough, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars going after another one of their weaknesses. Obviously, they could tackle defensive line, which is one of their bigger weaknesses, but I have them tackling offensive line to protect Trevor Lawrence. We've seen this player tied a little bit to Jacksonville through rumors, that being Armand Mbu, offensive tackle out of Missouri. I wouldn't be surprised if they brought in a guy to protect Trevor Lawrence, their franchise guy, who they just paid a big extension to, like $200 million or something. I feel like it's $225. I don't know why that number is sticking out to me. So I wouldn't be surprised if they take somebody to protect their guy who got injured multiple times because of the poor offensive line play. And with Liam Cohen seeing what good offensive line play can do to revive a quarterback's career down in Tampa, that being with Baker Mayfield, I feel like he's going to bring some of that same idea here to Jacksonville in order to stabilize and start to build up Trevor Lawrence's career as a quarterback. So, a little bit of a shocker, but at the number 5th overall pick, I have the Jaguars taking Armand Mbu, offensive tackle out of Missouri. All right, so next up we have the Raiders. The Raiders right now, the rumor was that Gentry could go 5 to the Jaguars. I don't think they're going to do that. They already have a number one, first round running back on the roster. They're not going to bring in a second unless they have like a plan already. So I have if Ashton Gentry falls past 5, I have the Raiders taking him. Obviously, Pete Carroll at his peak, at his best in Seattle, had a dominant running game behind Marshawn Lynch, another running back which seemed to be untackleable. Similar to Ashton Gentry. I wouldn't be surprised if they take offensive line here or maybe defensive line as well. But to me, the fitting of Ashton Gentry and the Raiders makes too much sense at this point. And pairing him up with a play-action quarterback in Geno Smith wouldn't be a horrible idea either, getting defenses to bite on Gentry as he becomes more and more of a weapon as the weeks go on during the season. And then trying to throw the deep ball. Yes, they're going to have to tackle the wide receiver position in some way. I forget who their top Raiders. Jacoby Myers is still their top guy right now. Kyle Phillips, Trey Tucker. So a lot of these guys are like lesser known guys that could probably still get the job done. But I don't think that they would hate maybe trading back up and getting a wide receiver at some point. But right now, Ashton Gentry to the Raiders just makes too much sense. A guy that's a dominant running back that teams can't tackle seems to fit well in the Pete Carroll scheme as a whole. So, at the number 6 overall pick, the Las Vegas Raiders take Ashton Gentry, running back out of Boise State. All right, at number 6, the Jets need a lot. They need offensive line. They need tight end. What's concerning to me is that at this point, two top offensive tackles will already have been going off the board. So you're going to see other teams try to trade up. If they need an offensive tackle, try to trade up to this late, from probably 7 to 13. You're going to see teams try to trade up and try to select a tackle if they can. Looking at the Jets, I feel like they have a few different positions of need. Offensive tackle, they could take. Defensive line, they could take. But who I have them taking right now is Tyler Warren, tight end out of Penn State. He's one of the better overall prospects in this entire draft. And I feel like Tyler Warren is going to be the best guide for the Jets to select. It gives Justin Fields a big target to hit across the middle of the field. And it gives a solid guy to add an extra blocker on the line in case the Jets need it. Brings physicality, which Aaron Glenn is looking for in a lot of his players. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is the way that the Jets go. I also wouldn't be surprised if they go offensive tackle Kelvin Banks from Texas here as well. But as of right now, I feel like Tyler Warren is the more clear-cut answer for the Jets at this minute, and he might come into this offense and add an extra wrinkle, which can help them try to make another playoff push behind a different quarterback. So with the number 7 overall pick, I have the New York Jets selecting Tyler Warren, tight end out of Penn State. All right, next up we have the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers are in an interesting situation. They need to address a lot of defense right now. They need to address linebacker, defensive line, the whole 9 yards they need to address right now. So I do feel like the most likely person for them to take and the player that's been linked to them the most is outside linebacker or edge rusher Jalen Walker in Georgia. He can come in, try to replace Brian Burns, which is a player that Carolina was desperately missing last year. Could have added an extra piece, which could have helped the Panthers win even more games. Obviously, the pair alongside Derek Brown, defensive tackle down there, who was injured last year. Yes, I do recognize that. But bring in a fresh Derek Brown and a young Jalen Walker, and these two might be able to produce alongside the defensive edge. I wouldn't be surprised if they go wide receiver or secondary with this pick to help put alongside either Xavier Legette or alongside J.C. Horn. But right now they have a couple more positions that are of more importance, that being the linebacker position. So with the number 9 overall pick, with the number 8 overall pick, I have Jalen Walker, edge out of Georgia, going to the Carolina Panthers. Okay, at number 9 we have the Saints picking, and normally, if this was maybe last week or 2 weeks ago, I would have Shedeur Sanders going here at 9 to the Saints, because the Saints need a quarterback, yada yada yada. But I do feel like the Saints realize that a stud defensive lineman in Mason Graham has fallen this far. Most likely, if he falls another pick, he's going to go, and they're not going to have another chance at a high-end prospect like this. To bring along a new age of defensive line down there, since Cam Jordan is most likely on his last year as a Saint. Bring in a young defensive lineman who can not learn behind, but learn alongside of Cam Jordan. And bring in a guy that can help shore up an area in which Kellen Moore tends to lack, that being solid defensive play. So I do feel like the Saints, although they could realistically take Shedeur Sanders, I do feel like the Saints stick where they are and take defensive linemen, take the best, arguably the best interior defensive lineman in the draft, that being Mason Graham out of Michigan. So with the number 9 overall pick, I have the New Orleans Saints taking Mason Graham, defensive lineman out of Michigan. All right, up next we have the Chicago Bears. Bears could take a litany of different positions, but who I have them taking is offensive line. All right, we saw this in Detroit. Ben Johnson understands that if you invest in the trenches, that your offense takes a jump up as a whole. Obviously, we've been seeing them take a lot of interior offensive linemen, so now it's time for them to take a tackle. So with 2 solid tackles already going, and most likely only a few more higher end tackles still existing, that most likely won't fall to the second round at all. That tells us that we're most likely going to see the Bears take a flyer on offensive tackle Kelvin Banks out of Texas, which isn't bad. He's a big boy. He can sit on the edge and he can protect the quarterback, which he has shown with his time protecting Quinn Ewers and a little bit of Arch Manning as well. So with the number 10 overall pick, I have the Chicago Bears selecting Kelvin Banks, offensive tackle out of Texas. All right, next up we have the San Francisco 49ers, a team that just lost a premier corner in Charvarius Ward. So out with the old, in with the new. A guy that used to be projected within even the top 5 and top 10 has now fallen to 11 for the 49ers to take a chance at. There's a high possibility that the 49ers trade back for another piece, maybe a veteran piece as well, or maybe just draft compensation in general. But if they don't, this has to be the position where they're going to try to target, that being corner. Take arguably the best or second best corner in the draft, that being Will Johnson, corner out of Michigan. He played on these dominant Michigan defenses alongside players like a Mason Graham. So these guys know how to win. They got to the national championship. So we could see the 49ers take a flyer on arguably the most sound and fundamentally sound corner in this entire draft, that being Michigan's Will Johnson. So at the number 11 overall pick, I have the 49ers selecting corner Will Johnson out of Michigan. All right, next up we have the Dallas Cowgirls selecting, and there's one player that I realistically see them, or one position, I see them taking wide receiver to give CeeDee Lamb some help and Dak Prescott another weapon. A nice guy to complement alongside of him would be a McMillan Taritoa, McMillan. McMillan is actually a really solid wide receiver. Yes, his numbers were down in 2024, but he had a outstanding 2023 season. A lot of teams believe that he could replicate his 2023 season in the right system again and with the right quarterback. So it wouldn't be out of the question that the Cowgirls take a flyer on arguably the best wide receiver in this draft, that being Taritoa McMillan. So, at the number 12 overall pick, I have the Dallas Cowgirls selecting Taritoa McMillan, wide receiver out of Arizona. Alright, next up we have Miami, and there's one player that I realistically see here now, especially with the Jalen Ramsey trade, which could play a major impact. I'm not sure that that's going to happen the first day of the draft, but that we could see something along the lines of that happening in the second and third days of the draft for the Dolphins to bring up some of their capital in order to fill some more spots with younger players. So the best corner currently on the board is Jahid Barron or Jahdae Barron, corner out of Texas. He showed some solid physicality. He's able to do a lot of good man coverage. That's where he thrives the most. So I believe that Jahdae Barron is most likely the pick to come in and replace a Jalen Ramsey, who will most likely depart with the team relatively soon. So with the number 13 overall pick, I have the Miami Dolphins selecting Jahdae Barron, corner out of Texas. Alright, next up is the Indianapolis Colts. Now, the Colts are sitting at an interesting position. They have quite a few positions that they need. But right now, weirdly enough, their top rumored guy to draft here in the first round, it used to be Tyler Warren. I used to believe Tyler Warren would fall that far. But as of right now, with how things are laying with my mock draft, I still have them taking a tight end, and I have them taking the second best tight end off the board. Probably getting inspiration, obviously, from Tyler Warren getting selected earlier. But also, the Raiders selecting Brock Bowers last year with around the same position that the Colts are now, and that highly working out. So I feel like some teams will get inspired by that to bring in a weapon to produce, and they hope that he becomes the next Brock Bowers. So with the Indianapolis Colts bringing in a new weapon, I could see them taking one last shot at the Shane Steichen and Anthony Richardson circus. That is the Indianapolis Colts at this point. So they bring in a big receiver, a big target over the middle for Anthony Richardson, that being Colston Loveland, tight end out of Michigan. So with the number 14th overall pick, the Indianapolis Colts select Colston Loveland, tight end out of Michigan. All right, sitting at number 15, the Atlanta Falcons are most likely going to take an edge rusher at this spot, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they trade back with a team. There's a few different situations that I could see here. Them trading back with a team that maybe wants to take a shot at Shedeur Sanders, or maybe a team that likes a Marion Hampton sitting at number 15, or maybe even like a Matthew Golden, though I believe he might fall, or a Walter Noland as well. Maybe, I'm not saying Jackson Dart will go before Shedeur, but if Shedeur goes at 9, maybe a team trades up to 15 to take a Jackson Dart there. But looking at it, I don't think that the Falcons are likely to trade back if a team doesn't want to take quarterback there. There are multiple other spots where I see a team trading up, and I'm going to have a trade up here in a little bit for a quarterback. But, realistically, if the Falcons sit still, they need help along their defensive line, and the best defensive lineman, or at least at the edge position, is currently Mykel Williams, edge out of Georgia, a really solid player. He was there during the national championship runs by the Bulldogs. He played alongside players like a Jalen Carter, like a Jordan Davis, like a Nakobe Dean. So I wouldn't be surprised if a few teams, if he doesn't get taken higher by some teams. But I just feel like based off all the needs of the teams ahead of them, Mykel Williams falls to 15 for the Atlanta Falcons to try to shore up a spot which they struggled to address throughout every single draft for the past decade. So, at the number 15 overall pick, the Atlanta Falcons select Mykel Williams, edge out of Georgia. All right, the Arizona Cardinals have two positions to go. They can either go defensive line, or they can go offensive line. I feel like it's more likely that they go interior defensive line. They just brought in a Josh Sweat on a big deal, bring in a guy in the middle. All right, they don't have too much depth at the defensive line, so bring in a young guy, a guy that might be able to start, a guy that might be able to learn from some of the veterans on that defensive line. Wouldn't be a horrible decision for this Arizona Cardinals. Apologies for that, but I have them taking the best interior defensive lineman on the board at that point. That being Derek Harmon, defensive tackle out of Oregon. I wouldn't be surprised if they take a shot at a Mike Green here, but I do feel like how things are starting to fall. Derek Harmon makes the most sense for an interior pick for this Arizona Cardinals team. So, at the number 16 overall pick, I have the Arizona Cardinals selecting Derek Harmon, defensive tackle out of Oregon. All right, so what's one position that the Bengals need to address? That would be edge rusher. Well, all the defense. Let's put it that way. All the defense, but mainly edge rusher, especially with the possible loss of Trey Hendrickson, who could get traded day 2. I don't think he gets traded day 1, similar to Jalen Ramsey, an older vet that could be injury prone, wants a big contract, or a team's going to have to pay out the rest of his big contract. So these guys are mostly going to get dealt for second round and or third round picks. So to try to bring in a replacement for Trey Hendrickson, the Bengals focus on, they have two top defensive edge players here, that being Mike Green out of Marshall and Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. I wouldn't be surprised if a Mike Green goes a little bit earlier, possibly. But I do feel like how things fell, the Bengals most likely thank their lucky stars that they got a shot at a Mike Green. So I do feel like with the 17th overall pick, the Cincinnati Bengals pick Mike Green, edge out of Marshall, to try to come in and either be a running mate with Trey Hendrickson or replace him. All right, so at number 18, the Seattle Seahawks, I feel like they might make a trade. Where are you? Here we go. With the Pittsburgh Steelers. Where are you? There you are. Trading first round picks. Steelers will give them some extra draft compensation. So the Steelers trade up. I'm not going to get into exactly what the trade compensation will be, but the Steelers trade up to number 18 to pick a player who they not sure are going to slide to them at 21. So, yeah, I have them taking Shedeur Sanders here at pick number 18. They trade up just a little bit. They trade again with the Seahawks. Obviously, they swap first-round picks. Steelers have some extra trade compensation. Whether what that is, that can be debated. But I feel like they trade up to a spot where they know that Seattle's not going to be taking a quarterback. So they trade up a few picks to take the guy that they are going to stake their future on. Even if they bring in an Aaron Rodgers, they can always have Shedeur sit behind Aaron Rodgers. And if Rodgers starts to struggle, they bring in a Shedeur Sanders as well. So at the number 18 overall pick, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Shedeur Sanders, quarterback out of Colorado. Next up, you have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they need a couple different spots here, mainly defensive, a safety, a defensive lineman, but I feel like they're going to take the most talented defensive player on the board currently, that being Jahad Campbell, linebacker out of Alabama. He can come in. He can kind of become the new, what was his name? Oh, why am I blanking on his name? Buccaneers. Well, who was it? Come in and replace a White, Derek White. Who was it? Devin White. Come in to replace a Devin White, and he can be versatile. He can go after the quarterback as well at his position. So, at the number 19 overall pick, the Buccaneers take arguably the best defensive player still on the board at this point, that being Jahad Campbell, linebacker out of Alabama. Next up, we have the Denver Broncos, and a lot of teams are saying, oh, they're going to take wide receiver, oh, they're going to take tight end, oh, they're going to take a defensive player that Sean Payton loves. No. There's one position, and one position only, that they're going to take in this first round. And I won't be happy if I'm wrong here, but I have them taking running back. I have them taking Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina. Denver desperately needs a dangerous running back that defenses can fear, because they can plan against Bo Nix. But if Sean Payton's able to open up the play-action game with Bo Nix, using Omarion Hampton as a threat to run the ball, then that's going to take more pressure off of Bo Nix and allow him to develop himself, and B, it's going to allow him to take deeper shots down the field, which at the end of the season kind of became Bo Nix's bread and butter, was taking deep shots to his wide receivers. Yes, it wouldn't hurt if they got a wide receiver in the second round. I mean, looking at some of these guys on this list that are most likely going to be there, you have a Jaden Higgins, wouldn't be a horrible guy, but maybe a Trey Harris. But a lot of these guys, if you don't get them early, then they're probably going to, the quality of the wide receiver is going to drop off significantly, looking at all the guys here. So at the number 20 overall pick, The Denver Broncos select Omarion Hampton, running back out of North Carolina. Next up, we have the Seattle Seahawks. They traded back with the Steelers, so now they're picking at pick number 21. Yeah, they have a few positions of need, but to me, they need to address interior offensive line or just offensive line in general. I wouldn't hate if they take an interior guy like a Tyler Booker or like a Donovan Jackson as well, but I just feel like they need to shore up the edge a little bit more with some of their tackles starting to age and some of them retiring this past offseason. So I have them taking the best offensive tackle on the board to protect Sam Darnold's blind side, and that being Josh Simmons, offensive tackle out of Ohio State. He did a really good job protecting Will Howard during the run. I believe he also started for, who was it? He might have started for C.J. Stroud. I forget off the top of my head, but he's done a solid job at the collegiate level protecting the quarterback. Now we just need to see that translate over to the pros, and a team that desperately needs an offensive lineman is the Seattle Seahawks. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if they take an interior offensive line here as offensive lineman here, but as of right now, they're going to take the best offensive lineman period on the board, that being Josh Simmons, offensive tackle out of Ohio State. All right, next up you have the LA Chargers, and there is one position that they need to take right now the most, and the playoff loss to the Texans exposed that the most. I mean, me and my buddy were watching that game, and we were kind of just making fun of how they were only passing to one guy. So Justin Herbert needs some help in the passing game, and it wouldn't hurt to bring in a stud like Matthew Golden here. Matthew Golden, one of the higher, he performed very well in the combine, which elevated his draft stock a bit above even Luther Burden, who's still on the board. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Chargers take a swing at a guy that they know can be quick alongside Ladd McConkey's physicality when it comes to catching the ball. So Matthew Golden would be a solid pair with Ladd McConkey on this Chargers offense. And this just makes too much sense. This is their biggest weakness. Justin Herbert could only pass to like one guy deep. And if Justin Herbert, who likes to do that, can only do that to one person, then he's going to need some help. Plus, they brought in Mike Williams, who can be injury-prone, but Matthew Golden could probably learn a thing or two from Mike Williams as well. And he could possibly be the third option, allowing himself to line up against third-best corners and allowing himself to get some decent stats. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Chargers go wide receiver here. They could also go defensive line, but I just feel like wide receiver has to be the first thing that they deal with. Obviously, I said this with the Broncos, but once you get past these few top guys, a lot of the talent starts to drop off quite quickly. So with the number 22nd overall pick, the LA Chargers select Matthew Golden, wide receiver out of Texas. Next up, we have the Green Bay Packers, who are most likely going to take some form of defensive lineman. With the best defensive lineman, arguably based off of the combine and the numbers he was able to put up, being Shamar Stewart, edge out of Texas A&M. Obviously, the Packers will never take a weapon in the first round for their quarterback, so they'll take a defensive lineman instead. Even though they need probably a wide receiver one, they'll settle for a defensive lineman that can either really overperform or highly underperform. So they take the best guy available at that position, that being Shamar Stewart, edge out of Texas A&M. So, like I just said, Green Bay Packers select with the 23rd overall pick. The Green Bay Packers select Shamar Stewart, edge out of Texas A&M. Minnesota, they need help on defense. I don't think that it would be a horrible thing if they brought in a A safety to learn behind, what's his face, the Hitman. Oh, damn, now I'm forgetting his name. Vikings. Harrison Smith? Yeah, Harrison Smith. Um, yeah, bringing a guy to learn behind him, help shore up the secondary for the next couple of years, which was a very weak spot for them. So I wouldn't be surprised if they take a guy who they've been almost apparently infatuated with for the past few months since the combine. That being Nick Emenwariye, safety out of Carolina. He did a solid job down at the collegiate level. Again, we're going to want to see a lot more production out of him at this pro level, but I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see him perform quite highly with a Brian Flores being his defensive coordinator. So with the number 24 overall pick, the Minnesota Vikings select Nick Emenwariye, safety out of South Carolina. All right, next up we have the Houston Texans. And I'm just going to say from basically here, from the Texans at pick number 25 all the way down to the Birds at pick number 32, we could see a trade back up. We could see a trade between these teams. As of right now, I'm not certain if any team would want to trade back up into the first round or rather trade up to a high second round pick. So I feel like as of right now, I'm not going to really have any trades right here. I could see the Eagles trading up somewhere in this window to take a guy that they like, but it might cost them a little bit. So let's go with who the Texans are going to take here. They need help at a few different positions, but I feel like their biggest need would probably be wide receiver at this point, and with a couple different highly rated wide receivers sitting here with Emeka Egbuka. I'm going to be butchering that. Emeka Egbuka or Luther Burden. For some reason, I just feel like Luther Burden would be the better pick out of the two. I feel like Luther Burden has fallen because he had that a worse season in 2024 than he did in 2023. But I just feel like he would be the better pick out of the two. And with how desperately the Texans need help at wide receiver, only realistically having Nico Collins at the start of next season, I wouldn't be surprised if they brought in a stud like Luther Burden. So, with the number 25th overall pick, the Houston Texans select Luther Burden, wide receiver out of Missouri. All right, next up is the Los Angeles Rams. Rams could go a couple different positions. Maybe we see an interior offensive lineman go here. Maybe we see a defensive lineman go, or a defensive player in general. But I feel like their top need right now is maybe bring in a young wide receiver or a young offensive lineman. But I wouldn't be surprised if they stuck here, took the best wide receiver left on the board before things start to drop off, that being Emeka Egbuka. He's a solid wide receiver. Obviously, he's out of the wide receiver factory that is Ohio State. He's played on some really solid offenses over the years. So this is kind of a safe pick for the Rams here. So with the number 26 overall pick, the Los Angeles Rams select Emeka Egbuka with wide receiver out of Ohio State. All right, next up we have the Baltimore Ravens. I feel like the Ravens could be a team that trade back. They could be a team that trades up if they see a player that's really sitting there that tickles their fancy. So, but they need to address this secondary for the foremost. That's their major problem right now. And I've been saying that all season, is that their Achilles heel was going to be that secondary. Though, to their credit, they shored it up a little bit near the end of the season. It still wasn't good enough to get them to the promised land. So with the number 27th overall pick, I'm going to have them take a Malik Starks, safety out of Georgia. Again, on a lot of these championship-winning Bulldogs teams, honestly, I would love if Malik Starks fell to Philly, but I know that's not going to happen. There's going to be a couple teams that might snag him before that. I just feel like the best fit for him would be this Baltimore defense. He can go alongside Kyle Hamilton, and those two could be a solid safety duo. So with the number 27th overall pick, I have the Baltimore Ravens selecting Malik Starks, safety out of Georgia. Next up, we have the Detroit Lions. They have a couple different guys that they could pick here. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to take a defensive lineman here or an interior offensive lineman. But as of right now, I still feel like their top need has to be defensive line, especially edge rusher, if they could put a guy alongside of Aiden Hutchinson, still on a rookie contract, because they're going to have to pay Aiden Hutchinson in a couple of years. So I wouldn't hate if they brought in a guy like a James Pierce Jr., who's, I argue, is probably the second best edge rusher behind Abdul Carter. Him falling this far shows how some teams don't probably look at like the tape 100%, but I do feel like James Pierce Jr. is the guy. Maybe his 2024 season wasn't as strong as some NFL teams had hoped, but looking at it now, he's the best player available at a position of need that the Lions need right now. So I do feel like he's a solid choice here with their 28th overall pick. So with the 28th overall pick, the Detroit Lions select James Pierce Jr., edge out of Tennessee. Next up, we have the Washington Commanders. Commanders could go a couple different ways. They could shore up offensive line. They could shore up their secondary. I do have them taking a corner here. I would hope that they would try to shore up the secondary, which tend to be was their weakness last year. They bring in a guy like Maxwell Hairston, corner out of Kentucky. I don't know too much about him. I know he's one of the higher rated corners in this draft class, but I would definitely like to see him on the field way before I make any form of judgment. But it seems like the Commanders are most likely going to go secondary with this pick. They could go Trey Amos here. I wouldn't hate if they went Trey Amos. But based off of how highly rated some of these guys are, I feel like Maxwell Hairston makes more sense over Trey Amos at this moment. So with the 29th overall pick, the Washington Commanders select Maxwell Hairston, corner out of Kentucky. All right, next up you have the Buffalo Bills. Now, Buffalo needs defensive line help. A lot of their guys are aging. They need secondary help as well. They could go corner. But I just have them taking the best available guy at their position, that being Walter Nolan, defensive lineman out of Mississippi, or Ole Miss, whatever you want to call it. But Walter Nolan, a highly rated defensive tackle, has a lot of the kind of characteristics that you're looking for in a top-tier defensive tackle and a defensive tackle one that can eventually usurp the role from a veteran that is ahead of him. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets taken earlier, but just how things are shaken out, I feel like Buffalo has to take Walter Nolan here in order to boost up this defensive line. that they have and to keep it young as well. So, with the number 30th overall pick, I have the Buffalo Bills taking Walter Nolen, defensive lineman out of Mississippi. All right, KC has a couple different positions that they need, but mainly they need to take the top offensive tackle. And with realistically looking at all the offensive tackles, there's one really that's left, and then you're gonna have a large drop off in talent level. That being Josh Cornerly Jr., offensive tackle out of Oregon. He had some really solid starting years over at Oregon. He was able to protect his quarterback, whether it was, I forget who was ahead of, whether, was it Justin Fields? Did he play with Justin Fields? I don't think he played with Justin Herbert. But he protected Dylan Gabriel a decent amount. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see the Chiefs address a major problem that got exposed during the Super Bowl, that being their offensive line. So with the number 31st overall pick, I have the Kansas City Chiefs selecting Josh Cornerly Jr., offensive tackle out of Oregon. And lastly, but definitely not least, we have the Philadelphia Eagles sitting at pick number 32. They could go a couple different ways, but I could see them bringing in a Trey Amos if he falls this far to them. Obviously, he came in on a top 30 visit, and the Eagles like to bring in a lot of guys that they had on their top 30 visit. But to me, the guy that makes too much sense, and the guy that I finally learned his name before recording this podcast, that is Donovan. Hold on. I just had it too. Hold on. It is Donovan Ezaraku. That's it. Donovan Ezaraku, edge out of Boston College. I feel like he would be a solid high motor pick for the Eagles at this point. He recorded 16.5 sacks last season with the Boston College Eagles. So it only makes sense he goes from one Eagles team to the next. And he's just a top edge rusher in this entire draft as a whole. Obviously, you have players like Kenneth Grant that fall to the Eagles who they could take. They could take interior offensive line, though I don't feel like they would spend a first-round pick on the two offensive interior linemen that are left. They could take Trey Amos, like I said, but as of right now, I feel like Donovan Ezaraku is their best bet at the first in their first round. Obviously, they could trade up, which rumors, and they normally do anyway, they trade throughout the first round. But I don't feel like they would trade for somebody. They would trade up for more or back for more capital. But if the Eagles were to sit at 32, they would most likely... Okay, so let's do the outro here. With the 32nd overall pick, your Philadelphia Eagles select Donovan Ezaraku, edge out of Boston College. Obviously, a lot of mock drafts recently have had Jackson Dart going in the top first round. They have possibly, there's been rumors that Jalen Milroe go in the first round. Mason Taylor, tight end at LSU. But yeah, there are a couple different areas where there could be, any player could go there, any mixture. But I do feel like my picks right here make the most sense, and next week we'll go over my picks. But as of right now, I feel like all my picks make sense for how everything falls. Obviously, Shedeur Sanders is going to slide a little bit, and the Steelers trade up to make sure that no team trades up in front of them to get it, like a Saints trading back in the first round or a Giants trading back in the first round ahead of them. So that was it, guys. Tomorrow's draft night, and the future of the Eagles will be changed depending on who they take. Again, they could take a Donovan Ezeraku, like I said, or a Trey Amos, who they also seem to like. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how teams go. I'm most interested to see how the first 15 kind of fall. And then after that, we're going to see some teams probably trade back in. But the fun doesn't really start until Shedeur Sanders probably gets picked, in my opinion. All right. So that's going to be it for this episode. I thank you guys for tuning in to my mock draft 3.0. Obviously, we'll go over it, how well I did last week or next week. So, all that being said, hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. And remember, go Birds.